What is up, folks? Justin here. This episode goes out to all the pastry chefs listening, or even any of you savory cooks that work with a pastry chef in your life. Do you enjoy those sweet bites at the end of a tasting menu? I certainly look forward to them like no other. I've got a very special episode 45 of the Emulsion podcast today. I was psyched to sit down with Genie Kwon, who is the pastry chef and part owner of Oriole, the 2 Michelin-starred modern American restaurant in Chicago. And one of you guys actually set this up. Shout out to Amanda for making this connection. We had a great time. It was certainly great to talk to her. This was actually the first time the podcast was recorded in an actual restaurant, so you can definitely enjoy some ASMR action of restaurant noises in the background of this interview. I love that part. So just looking at my demographics on YouTube, which happens to be where a lot of you folks listen to this show, there's a huge percentage of you that are young and male, and not to stereotype, but that probably means most of you are like me and you're a savory cook. So you might be wondering, Justin, why did you interview a pastry chef? Well, this episode starts off a little bit slow. Give it a few minutes to get going. We talk about travel a little bit, discuss her time in Singapore and even at 11 Madison Park, and then we get into some chat that I think a lot of you first-time fine dining restaurant peeps are really going to enjoy. So everything from her philosophy on those last dozen or so bites, and more importantly, why she uses that number as a reference, the importance of having a pastry chef, not just for menu purposes, but for just strict business as a restaurant, the tug of war with savory chefs, the critical value of eating at your own restaurant, using social media to stay relevant, fear of change, passion in repetition, and I hate saying it because it sounds so cliche and needy, but please dedicate some time to listen until the end because she really drops some solid knowledge for new cooks to the industry, whether it's pastry or savory, and what she would do if she was starting out today. So without further ado, my interview on episode 45 of The Emulsion with Genie Kwon. I mean, I like the delivery noises coming in and out and the music. So what are you drinking now? Are you drinking chai?
It's a chai almond latte.
Got it.
Yeah.
Because I had read that you gave up coffee.
I did. I got back on it. It just makes me crazy, so...
Like you get shakes.
Yeah, so I do appreciate the flavor. I was drinking decaf for a while. I just like the act of having a caffeinated beverage.
It's a ritual.
Yeah, so... I don't know.
Okay, good. So it doesn't freak you out that this is my second coffee of the day.
Oh, no.
No, you killed it. This is really good.
Yeah, good. I definitely went on a rant of latte art. I think we were running out of espresso because I was just practicing all day.
That's fantastic. Have you ever had a job like that? Like a barista job? Or
I had a barista job, but never... It was not like it is today. It was just coffee, foam.
Yep. Go.
You know,
Send
and
it.
there was definitely no finesse when I was doing it.
Right. So, not to start it off like too heavy in any aspect, but I did read that you are also allergic to alcohol.
I am.
That's still the case.
It's funny. So
no way. That is adorable.
I just stopped trying because I can only get through like a quarter of a beer before I start feeling a little sick. So it's just a waste. It's wasted on me. I wish I could appreciate it. I definitely try to taste. If Aaron or Sam is pairing something, I'll taste. But I can't. They do shots during service sometimes, and I just started yesterday actually with
the tiny one.
I'll take the pickleback shot.
Right. How do you think that has affected your career? Because especially in Chicago, I worked here for a little while, and the drinking culture is real.
It's intense. It's intense. I'm definitely not of the same mindset for sure. It's kind of funny because the first job I ever had was a pretty dry job. You know, I was working in a bakery, and people went out after work, but nothing too crazy. I do a lot of observing.
Yep.
For sure.
Same. So I'm not allergic, but I just don't enjoy the feeling of being kind of like inebriated in any capacity. So I would normally stay away from it, but it was definitely something that I've felt pressured into at certain points in my career.
Right.
But I had a friend who... He gave me this advice once where it was like, if you really want to skyrocket your career in this industry, just stop doing anything for maybe like 2-3 years and then just like look up and see where you are, and you'll find that you're like way further ahead than you ever could have imagined. Have you noticed that? Like, do you notice that you've been able to either work better or like achieve a different level of success because you abstain from alcohol?
I just feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just a lack of energy on my part. It just seems like when people are working constantly and tired and the stress of the job, and then they just want to go out, I just feel as if I don't know if I could even do it.
I'm the same. I don't know. I don't understand how you can. It's this roller coaster, right? Of like stimulant, depressant, depressant.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just a masochist. I'm definitely a black sheep in the industry for sure.
Yeah.
I don't do drugs. I don't do alcohol. Not that hasn't been presented before, or not that I have necessarily judgments towards either way. I think just for me personally, I joke sometimes if I can barely do this sober, how am I going to do it inebriated? You know what I mean?
Right.
So
I'm exactly the same.
I definitely think that it's a culture, but I think that there's also this kind of trend where people are also seeing that and understanding that, and there's always going to be phases in this industry, and I think that like most other professions, it definitely sorts out the people that are in it for the long haul and people that aren't.
Yeah, and it's a really good, easy way to burn out.
Yeah, it's a choice that you have to make, and I mean, you can make a lot more money doing a lot less physical work doing this, and to be able to do it, you have to be passionate about it, and that also means enduring the suffering that goes along with it. So you know, it's part of the industry, and I don't necessarily think that it'll ever go away, but I definitely think there's a shift that's going on, and there's so many shifts in this industry right now. It's insane. I can't even wrap my brain around it, but you know, you just gotta do what's best for you. And I can't necessarily can't necessarily say that I'm further in my career because of a certain set of scenarios or circumstances, but I also think that I might not have been doing it for this long if certain things were the case. So
it didn't propel you. It just made it so that you could stay in longer.
I think so. Yeah. For sure.
Sustainability.
For sure. Yeah.
So again, not to start it off too heavy or anything. that was a pretty heavy start. When's the last trip you've taken?
My boyfriend, he's our chef de cuisine, Tim. We take a lot of short trips, always based around food.
Yep.
You know, we take 36-hour trips to, the last one we went to was Minneapolis, to visit a friend of ours who just opened a new restaurant. And she makes the best pizza in the country.
Really? What's it called? Shout
out. It's called Young Joni.
Young Joni.
That's the new restaurant that opened a year ago that has pizza as well as other things. But she opened a place called Pizzeria Lola, I think probably maybe 7 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
And then she has a slicery called Hello Pizza.
Got it.
So all three restaurants are in different parts of the city. You know, pizza is something that I could eat every day, and I love it. And I've eaten a lot of it around the country, and I'm going to stand firm that it's the best pizza I've ever had.
Is it New York style? Is it?
The slicer is New York style. I think there's a Sicilian slice there as well. But the other is more kind of Neapolitan style pizza.
Yeah.
And it's just this perfect ratio of crust to sauce to toppings, and it's awesome.
Had you been before to Minneapolis, or was that your first time?
I have been before, and we went specifically to go get pizza there. And we drove 7 hours, and Tim had been there, I think, when he was in college, and he just had an incredible experience.
Yep.
Just not only the pizza was delicious, but the service was amazing.
Yeah.
He's like, we gotta go here, so we just drove one weekend.
That's fantastic.
We go to LA a lot, but the last major trip that we had was before the restaurant opened. We went to South Korea.
Wow.
And we went to Taiwan.
Yep.
And it was incredible. I had never been to Korea to a point where I remembered.
Right.
And I don't speak Korean, so, you know, I always kind of feel like a fish out of the water, but it was definitely an eye-opening trip, for sure.
Those are two places very high on my list.
Yeah.
Has
highly suggest it.
Yeah. Has that influenced the menu now at all, as far as, like, do you draw any inspiration? Because I know, like, when I come back from a trip, if I'm writing a menu, it's very easy
Right.
to like be like, yeah, I kind of want to put gochujang on something.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
There
Because
was gochujang at one point. I think that the trip itself was definitely inspiring. I think for us, it's more just a cultural thing. It's always going to reflect our palate, what we like to make, what we like to eat. We have a really diverse crew here
Sure.
in general. And so there is, in general, a lot of Asian influence, but not necessarily specifically because of that trip. Like we had a Vietnamese cook who was an amazing cook and brought a lot of things from her heritage, and it was definitely, especially in the beginning when we were formatting the menu and how it's evolved, it's always been an incredible collaboration. And not only with the back of the house, but the front of the house, most all of them used to cook or still cook.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think that is probably one of the greatest strengths that we have. I mean, this restaurant was kind of this fantasy situation that serendipitously fell into place,
Right.
and just having that pedigree, having years and years of experience between all of these people that we opened with, and that have come on since we opened, has truly influenced the menu for the last almost 2 years now.
Sure.
So
Are the staff meals bomb? Do you guys
they're
find
pretty
that?
baller.
Yeah.
I mean, we go hard on
hard,
staff
yeah.
meal. Yeah. So there's days, of course, where time is a crunch and we make pasta and salad and
course.
things like that. But it is the one meal we have. It is
Sure.
the one time where we can make something that we want to eat. So everybody kind of has their role, and luckily for us, we can order in things specifically
For
for
staff.
staff meals,
Yeah.
so we're not just confined to using
Trim.
leftovers.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
So sometimes we'll have Wagyu chili or something,
Hell yeah.
but it's definitely not for lack of effort
That's
for
the
a
best.
family meal.
That's the best. How did I read that you were working in Singapore for a little while?
I was.
How did that change how you think about pastry? Because my trip over there was amazing, but I'd be interested to hear about kind of like your takeaways and what you were able to
Right.
garner.
Singapore was one of the most beautiful countries I've ever seen. It was so clean.
It's a utopia.
It's crazy. That particular time for me was transition mode. I left 11 Madison Park. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to move, but I didn't know where.
Yep.
Singapore was the first time that I lived overseas, and it made me realize how small fine dining made the world,
It's
which
real.
is pretty awesome.
Yep.
I messaged a few friends asking them where I should eat, what I should go see, and then one of them was like, "You should just stay with my family."
What?
So I stayed there, and they treated me like I was a part of their family.
Wow.
And I got to work, not necessarily work, I staged with some incredible pastry chefs there. It was the first time where I was in this scenario of people that, I hadn't been a pastry chef then at that point, but I was looking at them and we had these similar interests, and these were internationally renowned pastry chefs.
Right.
And I was like, this is badass, not necessarily for myself wanting that type of recognition, but to be in a scenario where I could sit with these people and I could be seen as not a female chef, not a female pastry chef, but just a chef.
Right,
Like we were
right.
just talking to each
Part of the
other.
gang,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And I think to have that experience and just seeing these people who have opened businesses around the world and having this very specific business acumen was one of the greatest experiences I'll ever have.
Sure. And did that carry over? Were you involved in any capacity with Oriole in that way, like taking that experience, the business side experience?
Well, when this opportunity presented itself, Noah, who was the chef at Senza before this, Noah, Tim, and I were at a bar, and I had left my job. Senza was closing, and we were just joking around like it would be really awesome to work together.
Right.
And like, how cool would it be to bring on a pastry chef and have them be in a significant role in this opening, and it's awesome. It's a new stepping point for me, and coming on as a partner and an investor, it was pretty awesome because people see you differently.
Right.
And they treat you differently, and not that I necessarily think is a good thing, but it just helps me realize that I could be seen as a serious player, or whatever that means.
Well, because you have some skin in the game. You know
Exactly.
what I mean? Like that, there is something that comes along with it.
Yeah, I was betting on us,
Right, right.
and it was scary. It was very, very. It's hard because this is a fantasy situation. It's not gonna happen again. The way that this fell into place, and it's bittersweet in that way, because you kind of just want to leave it in this utopia bubble, and I'll always be grateful for that, and it just showed me what is possible. It showed me that I could still have an impact on an experience. I think that was the biggest thing for me, because pastry is in a weird time right now. The jobs are kind of fewer and far between, and there's, for me at least before this, there was this plateau of where do I go, what do I do I take on more restaurants, do I spread myself thinner, and I realized that I kind of wanted to be a little bit more focused, especially for this restaurant, for when we were opening. There were opportunities to do other projects, and I said no because I wanted to focus on here. And the pastry job that I had before this, I was running 3 outlets, and it was hard. There was definitely a learning curve that I was not prepared for, and that was my first pastry chef job, was running 3 outlets, and I definitely made mistakes, and I don't want to say that it wasn't for the better. I think that when you persevere through those times, you know what to expect for the next time around. So
Right.
it definitely helped me get to here.
Yeah. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, and maybe we can go a little bit deeper in that, why those pastry chef jobs are so few and far between. Because at least in the fine dining end of the spectrum, at least the chefs that are like going out on their own and trying to pursue their own projects, a lot of times they don't think about the pastry chef role. And I mean, I remember, when was it? It was probably like 2011, 12, 13, 14 were kind of like the golden age of,
Right.
Everybody had a pastry chef, and there was always like that I mean, like I have the your guys section on the menu here, and that was like everybody's menu.
Yeah.
But I know now that for me, when I do pop-ups in Seattle, the
Right.
other cook that I bring on specifically has those, like, a really good pastry repertoire
Right.
in him, and I really confine a lot of trust in him, because there is a very easy trap to fall into
Right.
when you will put up what people will call like a chef dessert.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is a lot that a pastry chef can bring to the table, but why do you feel like there are so few jobs, and why?
It's interesting because there's so many restaurants that are opening. So I have different opinions about it, because, there's always, you can't deny the impact that a pastry program has on the infrastructure of a restaurant, the revenue of an a la carte restaurant, especially.
Absolutely.
Looking at it from a numbers perspective, I totally understand the difficulty when you have a program that isn't necessarily making money. It's the first thing that's given away for free.
Yep.
And So a lot of times it is being outsourced to a cook or a savory cook or, Garmo pastry sort of thing, which I've definitely been a part of too. And luckily for here, I think, I never thought I was going to stay in fine dining this long. But there's a romantic part of it. I'm in love with it because there's so much opportunity here. Creative outlet, the resources. We have a fixed revenue essentially, especially because luckily for us, people have enjoyed it and they come back and they've spread the word. So we definitely, that was the big thing bringing me onto this project, was to have a significant portion of the menu be pastry. And selfishly for me, that's what makes it so great,
right.
Right. And I can have a team, and even though our entire team is really small, I have somebody that I can depend on to execute every day. And
so that you have one other chef de partie that works with you?
Yeah. Okay. So I have Kourtney. She is my sous chef, but she's also working a station too. But there's only 7 of us total in the kitchen.
Wow.
So, it was definitely a goal of ours. We wanted to open. We wanted to have the people that we thought were the most talented, hardest working. These were all people that we had knew previously, and it's been a push, but we also wanted to pay them in a way that they could live.
Right. A fair wage.
Exactly.
I get that.
And so it's not for lack of trying that we want to create an environment where they can learn, they can push, but also have a life. And that's also the reason why we're closed 2 days.
Right.
But I think that the places where that exists are fewer and far between these days. And
it's true.
And I don't know, I am in this situation where, again, this fantasy restaurant, I don't know if that would be the case if it was a la carte or a different restaurant where we were struggling to get people in here, and it's the first thing to get cut.
It's not for everyone.
Yeah.
For sure. Describe your philosophy with the desserts that you have, because you have those like 4 or 5 dishes on the menu, which is more than a lot of pastry chefs get to play around with. And so right now you have, at least the menu that I pulled, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's croissant, lychee, sweet potato, and then your mignardises. So what do you look for when you're writing that, and how does it change and ebb and flow and evolve for you?
When we were discussing the menu before we opened, we pretty much had a specific format that we wanted to stick to. We knew we wanted to do at least 15 courses. We didn't want people rolling out of here feeling disgusted, or that they couldn't, go out for another drink. We also didn't want the meal to take the entire night. We didn't want people to have to commit their entire evening to us just because, not that we think that we know everything or think that we know what people want, but from our experience, that's how we wanted to eat. We wanted things to be kind of quick in the beginning, small bites, things that you picked up with your hands, interactive. So when I was doing the menu, it was a challenge for me because I'm following 10 plus delicious, filling courses, and I thought to myself, I really only have about a dozen bites before you start to go from that point of being comfortably full to feeling like you're going to roll out of here. So I've definitely stuck to that format. I give myself a dozen bites, give or take a few, and everything is small, but it has to make an impact. There's going to be something refreshing to kind of break it up. And then, we played around with it. We evolved. Things changed significantly pretty much every day for the first year. Not necessarily discernible to the general public, but for us, and, we sit somebody down from the restaurant every couple weeks, every
I was
couple months.
noticing you and Tim ate here
Yeah.
in October, right?
We did.
Yeah.
And it's as much to just have a break, but as it is to see how the experience is. I mean, we look at this food every single day. We look at it from the kitchen, all the plates going out, but it's a completely different experience when you sit and you get to interact with our front of the house staff, which is incredible. And we need to eat because we need to see how everything flows together and to see if the amount of food is okay. When we first opened, I guess, is an example of how it's changed significantly. We used to have a pretty traditional cheese course with different cheeses, accoutrements, crackers, things like that. And we wanted it to be a communal experience, but then we were noticing that people were just stopping eating. Nobody wanted to take the last bite. Nobody wanted to be that person.
Yeah.
So it was extending the length of the experience to the point where it was detrimental to later tables, to other reservations. So we had to switch it up, and that's when we put the cheese with the croissant, and that was kind of our pseudo cheese course.
Right. So that's Ashbrook is the name of the cheese.
Ashbrook cheese.
Got it.
And that's been, the croissant has probably been, a iteration of it has been on there since we opened.
Got it.
And I've been wanting to take it off, but it's crazy that we have so many regulars.
Right.
And I just feel like that's one of the dishes, along with the the pasta and the bread, I feel like is another dish where people would just there'd be mutiny if we took it off.
That's a pretty Midwest cliche set of things that people love. The bread, the pasta, the cheese.
Yeah,
of course.
And so, we definitely change things, but there's also things that have been on since the beginning just because people love it so much.
You gotta listen to the market.
Yeah.
If they're telling you they love it, don't take it away from them.
The pasta's for sure that dish, and so luckily there's so many other courses that we can play around with.
Of course, so that's just the only thing.
Yeah, but there's always been a sushi bite. There's always been an oyster, things like that, just different sets and new dishes revolving around other ingredients. But
do you guys do you and the savory guys fight over ingredients ever? Because I would assume you guys try not to repeat any ingredients. So
we try. It's not the end of the world if it happens. It's happened before. Noah's very lax about that. He's like, he'll ask, are you thinking about using this? If not, like, that's totally cool.
Yeah.
I'll use something else. But there hasn't been too much overflow, and there's never been a tug of war with ingredients. But there's definitely overlap because some of the things that he does are, they do have fruit or things like that, and I didn't do savory ingredients a lot before, but I've been trying to get out of my comfort zone and work with savory things. So we definitely trade off for sure.
Sure. I think back to that point you made about actually sitting down and eating the entire meal. I think that's really overlooked. My mentor, the guy who I was working with last, which was in Norway, we would do that pretty frequently.
Oh, nice.
Where we would, like, Justin, you and one of the front of house people are sitting down next week, and you're going to eat the full tasting menu. We would put scales down, and we would weigh the food to make sure that, like, okay, if you get the 7-course tasting menu, you're getting 780 grams of food.
Right. And
then making sure that, like, the smaller 4-course menu, you were getting the same amount of food.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, like, however that works. And he would also instill this principle of, because when you plate up a dish for people to try, usually you'll have, like, 1 spoon of it, and you hope that you get enough mix of everything. But he would always kind of, like, I would give it to him, and he would take 1 spoon, and then he would say, okay, now you eat the whole rest of the rest of the dish.
Right.
Just to make sure that, like, you eat the entire dish and make sure that not just that 1 spoon that you get.
Right.
Do you guys do anything similar to that, or is that kind of hopefully conveyed in that
I have to shout out to Dan, our friend that just moved back to Norway yesterday.
Nice.
Pretty cool. But it's hard. It's hard. You know, when we make a dish, we eat the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
We make a separate dish, hopefully for somebody else to eat the whole thing. It's totally different in a tasting menu format, which is probably the biggest shift for me. I definitely had this a la carte format that you stuck to, you know, so that you could give somebody everything that they wanted in one plate. Luckily for us, I think we have the leeway to purposely leave out something that we want to incorporate later in the meal to kind of create this crescendo of an experience.
Yep.
I think that one of the things that people are most surprised about is textures in our dishes, and I think that's something that we focus on, but also something that we don't necessarily have to put into every single dish. But that just emphasizes how important it is for us to sit down, to go through and taste everything. You make a good point with the, you know, amount of food. People are always like, how am I going to eat 15 courses? But it's not necessarily more food than you would have at a a la carte restaurant in a traditional 3-menu course setting. So, or 3-dish course setting.
You're fine. We're in the restaurant.
You know, we are our biggest fans, but our harshest critics, and all we want to do is give a better experience to the guests, and what better way to learn from that than to do it on ourselves, you know? So, and it's just a nice perk to be able to do that for employees too. And just
like, here, this is what you're a part of.
Yeah, exactly.
You know? And I think that was an interesting way that you put into perspective, where you say you have like a dozen bites to work with. I've never heard of it compared to like that, but it's a good way to put it, where it's like you only have, because then you can decide if you like, it doesn't all have to be, you know, 4 3-bite dishes.
Right.
You can have a 1-biter.
Right.
And then a 5-biter, and then a 2-biter, and a, you know.
So the way it is now, I think it's probably 3 bites. The croissant is maybe 3. There's a little tempura sweet potato ice cream that's probably 3 or 4 bites. And then Mignardi's is a series of 3 little different desserts, so that can be eaten, it can be passed on, and you know, it's unfortunate when that happens, but that's the choice that's given to the guests, which allows me that leeway of also incorporating certain things that I want to incorporate, but leaving them off as well.
Sure. Are there any ingredients that you stay away from, or that you won't use in your desserts, and if so, maybe you can provide a reason behind that?
Now, there aren't that I won't try. I definitely used to stay away from savory ingredients before, just because I wasn't really comfortable using them. So then I switched, and I made the menu pretty savory for the menu iteration before this. But I was also using pretty gentle ingredients. I was using cucumber and corn and things like that, things that were naturally sweet. But the only thing I'll say is I won't use an ingredient that doesn't have a discernible flavor just for the sake of using it.
Sure.
You know, but I think that there's always ways to enhance flavors. I like to do complementary flavors, but everything that I do is so small that I have to do something that's very strong, just because people are only going to have 1 or 2 bites of it, and if they don't understand what it's going to taste like or what it's supposed to taste like, then it's just going to be lost on them. So I think the biggest thing that I learned, especially from the savory people, and Noah and Tim specifically, when you're using an ingredient, and let's say a savory one, like cucumber or corn, you have to try and make it taste as much of itself as possible. And usually that incorporates using salt and sugar and things like that. And it's been educational for me as a chef in general, to see them cook and see what they do, because it's definitely changed how I formulate things, how I make recipes, because I don't really measure things anymore when I start out, because most of the time I'm going to make it 10 times before I'm happy with it.
Right.
So I usually just try and eyeball it. And then once I get something that I'm happy with the flavor, I'll have remembered generally what I added to it, and then I'll weigh it out.
Got it.
And create a recipe for it.
Then that would drive Kourtney crazy, probably, if you just flew by the seat of your pants all the time.
Yeah, I definitely had a conversation with her about intuition. A recipe's only going to get you so far. But I definitely will come to her with a final recipe, and even then it still gets changed when we make it together and taste it together. And she has a good intuition and a good palate.
Have you guys worked together before? No.
We did not.
Okay, you brought her on.
Yeah, so I when we first opened, there was definitely that, I think, skepticism of a new restaurant opening. So I had a lot of difficulty finding a cook to commit, especially because of the time frame.
Of course.
So I hired somebody on that was very green, and I think it was a little too much in terms of, when you go from not having experience to working in fine dining.
And it's ambitious, and
it's tough, and I thought, that's how I started. I was green, so I had a mentor. Somebody took me in and taught me, and if you're not in this for your life, it's hard, and it's been refreshing to have somebody that understands that and has, had experience and wants to learn from me, which is crazy, but
right. So going back to the savory food part, I had read that you like to cook at home. What does it usually look like when you make savory food for yourself?
Oh man.
And I know chef food is all over the map sometimes. I have friends who do amazing dinner parties, and I have friends who just go home and make ramen and pasta,
right.
just like we've done countless times.
Well, Tim and I just moved into an apartment we've had this apartment for maybe 6 months. So I have to edit that saying, I only like to cook in a nice kitchen.
Yeah, there you go.
And this is the first nice kitchen we've ever had. The first thing we bought for this apartment was a butcher block table.
Hell yeah. It's game changing.
It was like the only thing that we wanted for this place.
Right.
And a nice dining room table to sit at. Those were the only two things we wanted. And so we are able to cook here, which is awesome. But we get home at maybe 1:30 in the morning, and we eat rice, kimchi, a fried egg, and pickled ginger almost every single day.
Those are the best. That's like the best meal. Eater came out with an article last night. It was a pretty lengthy one. Did you get a chance to look at that thing? It was like 4 chapters in it, and it was all about virality in food and all that stuff.
Right.
Does that, and I'll link it up for everybody listening, but does that play into any of the ways that you end up plating your food, or how you think about dishes, or do you think about kind of like that Instagrammable effect?
I think jokingly, yes.
Yeah. Yep.
I've been doing a lot of I mean, on Instagram I'm a nobody, but I like to have fun with it. It amuses me, so I'll do like stop motion videos with plating, or I always try and incorporate music to it. I think it's just for my own amusement, more so than anything. But I mean, you can't deny the impact that social media has on advertising, on just being relevant in society, I guess, but you also have to kind of take it with a grain of salt too.
To not go too rainbow cronut on everybody.
Yeah, right. I mean, I post to stay relevant for the restaurant. That's pretty much the only things that I post. I'll do like one every couple days, once a day or something like that. But and we have a social media page for Oriole, but it's just to let people know what we're doing.
Right, right. That should be the draw, not any sort of like fanfare and plating or ideas of dishes or...
I mean, our food is pretty straightforward. It's nothing that you can't wrap your brain around.
Sure.
So it's definitely there, and we appreciate it. We appreciate all the following that we've gotten, and it's a strong force, but you can't, judge your worth on what other people are saying, especially if they haven't even been here, so.
Of course, if they're just judging it on a photo.
Exactly.
Or something. Do you have any opinions on the chefs who are kind of looking to get that one Instagram famous dish and kind of ride that wave? Because there has been kind of an uptick of those.
I mean, I don't think there's any negative judgment towards it. I think that when you're in a restaurant, when you're working in this industry, and thinking about how we've gotten to this, it's just a very surreal, sometimes uncomfortable. It's, you know what I mean? We used to work in kitchens so that we didn't have to be in the public eye, and the fact that it's gotten to this point is pretty crazy, but to be able to influence people in a positive way, I guess you can look at it that way. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that, especially with the way that this industry is now and how many people are looking at you. It's kind of natural to be known for something or to have a signature dish in that way. It would be nice because there's things that we're proud of, and it would be awesome to be like, hey, look, this is something that I'm super proud of, and I don't want to change it because I worked so hard on it and things like that. But I think that something that I'm scared to do is change. I'm scared of evolving, but it's just a part of the process, and it's something that we have to do to not decay from mental atrophy, I guess.
Right. You're totally
a bigger
right.
picture.
You're totally right. What advice do you have, if any, to the new kind of pastry chefs coming into the industry? Because there's quite a few culinary students that listen to this show, and
oh man,
so a lot of them are on the savory side, just because that's how I present the show. That's how I grew up, and that's how where I feel comfortable giving any expertise. But if there are any pastry chefs listening that are new, how is this landscape different maybe for how you came up with it, or what should they be thinking about?
I guess if I it's hard. It's hard to be able to influence people, I guess. It's something that I've never really been comfortable with, but you have to love fundamentally doing this. You have to love everything about it. Being passionate about something is also loving the not glamorous parts of it. I mean, this is not, like we said before, you could be doing something and making way more money for a lot less effort. And it took me a long time to appreciate the art of doing something over and over and over and over again. And there's so many people that come out here, they want to do everything, they want to learn everything. The only way you're going to get to that point is if you feel comfortable doing something over and over and over again, because that's what you're going to be doing in this industry for the rest of your life. And that creative freedom does not come easily. It does not come quickly. I mean, I've been doing this for, I don't even want to say how long, but there's always going to be a new goalpost. There's always going to be a different challenge. It's never going to get easier. I had some really amazing mentors, some at my first job, and it's like eventually that learning curve plateaus, right? You are able to go into different environments and adapt quicker. And I think that's the part of experience that makes people better. But it's also up to you to challenge yourself all the time. Kourtney and I talk about how there's always a better way. There's always a better way. I might not necessarily know it, but I know it's out there, and I'm not going to stop looking for it. And for me, that goes with the appreciation of I'm going to be doing something every single day. I want to find the best, the quickest, the fastest, most efficient, easiest way to do it, because I'm not looking to make my life harder. I want to make it as easy as possible, and that comes with understanding that sometimes you have to feel uncomfortable and break out of your molds to realize that there might be a better way to do something. And luckily you can find a mentor that doesn't want to make things harder just to spite you. They want to actually make you a better cook. And that's kind of the culture that we created here. Was we have this pedigree of people that have worked in the industry for decades. And all we want to do is teach you in a way so that you don't make those same mistakes, but at the same time, sometimes those mistakes are necessary.
Right.
And, I don't want to tell people to not be scared. I'm scared every day. It's like you have to evolve, and you have to force yourself to do it. I mean, sometimes you just have to do it anyway, even if you don't want to do it.
Right.
And, yeah, you have to be passionate about it.
If you were starting off today, would you do something like come up to the back door of Oriole and just be like, you guys have been doing it for decades, let me learn from you? Or would you start at a pastry shop chain and learn something? Because there's a give and take with both.
Right.
So especially, like I mentioned, when it was kind of like the golden age of Michelin star pastry cooking, at that point where you could learn from all these people who had pastry chefs in their kitchens.
Right.
Now that we're in a bit of a different landscape, where would you start if it was you?
So my story was a little bit unique just because I went to culinary school. I started culinary school. They didn't have a separate pastry program, so I did savory pastry. But I also got my first industry job when I started. And I worked at a place called Flour Bakery in Boston, and it was Joanne and my managers, Nicole, and all the people training me. They were the best bosses I ever had. And I think that was unique because, this industry has horror stories of abuse and all those things, and I didn't start that way. I started in the most empowering culture of a business that I still to this day have ever seen in my career.
That's fantastic.
And it was this anomaly. I was working for a smart, strong woman that I respected, who paid her employees well, who cared about them and understood that if you cared about them, they would care about the guests.
Right.
And it's something that I'll always remember. But then I also worked for companies that I didn't agree with. And I did have exposure to turn and burn, high volume, fine dining, a bakery, hotels. I think that everybody just kind of has to carve their own path. I don't think that there's a mistake. I don't think that there's necessarily wrong choices. I think that there's choices that help you learn what you want and what you don't want for your life and for your career. I definitely think that I could have jumped and worked at places that would have propelled me further, but I also don't think that I was ready at that point. Even after 11 Madison Park, I would go on stages and people would be like, make a dessert.
Oh.
And I'd be like, what is that?
Yeah.
I've been so trained to be this workhorse,
And
to
follow
just work
orders.
efficiently,
Yeah.
exactly, that I had never made a dish that was mine before. And I was kind of blindsided by it because I never realized, been doing it for a decade and I had never created anything of my own, which was kind of crazy that it took me that long to realize that. And I think that maybe the positive thing for people coming out now is that they have those resources to learn and that they can have their own creative freedom and maybe do it faster, but they still have to appreciate a foundation.
Sure.
So I don't know if my 2 cents means anything, but I've been doing this for a long time and I've seen a lot of shit and I know what I want and what I don't want for my career, which for me means my life because I work to live. And I think that the biggest thing after all, I've had a million jobs and don't let a situation or a place or a person make you question what you're good at or what you want to do out of life, because if you're worried about something now, you're just going to be worried about something else later on, and you just got to do it anyway. That's it.
I appreciate that. That's really, really good. Where can people find you online? Or how if anywhere, do you want them to follow the restaurant?
We do have a page. We have an Instagram page for Oriole. I have an Instagram page that I post personally and professionally.
Is that at the Genie Kwon? Okay, got it.
But yeah, I've post when I can, and then all the other times I'm working, so.
Please, please, please go follow Genie and Oriole if you folks want more content from her or the restaurant. I had a ton of fun with that interview. I mean it when I say that I want to interview who you guys want to hear from, people who are in the heat of it, who can really bring value to you in whatever stage of your career you are in. So if you want to get involved in any way, hit me up on Twitter at Justin_Khanna. Make sure to hashtag the Emulsion so I can find you. That is TheEmulsion. Shout out to all my supporters on Patreon. You guys make the show possible. And head over to my YouTube channel and make sure you're subscribed there because Genie generously offered to feed me. So I got the experience of Oriole, the stellar 15-course menu at Oriole. I've definitely got an entire movie coming out dedicated to that experience. So stay tuned for that. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Justin Khanna signing off. Have a good one.